Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. We're happy to have you. It is our final week of our Be Relentless webinar series. And I think we're on, by the end of the week, we will have done 42 different webinars. And this week, our topic is business management. And so kicking us off today is Jo Mangum from Century 21. She's based out of North Carolina. And today we are talking about pricing strategies that you need to know now. So Jo, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lee. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to talk about my favorite topic, pricing.
Why is it your favorite topic? We were talking earlier, it's kind of back to basics now. So what makes this one so important?
Well, what makes this one so important is, we've had such a strong market for so long, and that allows people to price houses really like they want, right? And when the market starts changing, then what you have to do is you have to become very skilled at establishing pricing and helping them find the right pricing strategy, not just what the CMA has said. And so your skills have to come up quite a bit. And so that's why I think now, as the market's doing some changing, we really need to become skilled at pricing.
And I think these reminders that you have, if people haven't been in this market for a while, these are really good reminders that they can take with them and apply with different clients. So I'll hand it right over to you.
Great. I'm going to go right in and share my screen. And so, hey, everybody, I'm so delighted to be here, and we are going to be talking about pricing strategies. And I really love this topic for lots of reasons. But let me ask you a couple of questions, and that is, I just want you to think for a second. What would it be like if you never again had an overpriced listing? How would that impact your confidence? And how would that impact your energy level for the business? And how would that change your love of the real estate profession? As Lee said, my name is Jo Mangum, and there is my very first real estate picture. That was 1993. And I came into the real estate business doing what most agents do. I hopped onto the hamster wheel of buyers. And I worked really, really, really hard for buyers. And what I ultimately figured out was I needed listings. So I would go and I would start doing listing appointments, and I was not skilled at pricing. And because of that, what happened was I took some overpriced houses. And when I took those overpriced houses, then what happened was I realized the pain of that. And ultimately, I would go back to buyers again. And I went through this routine for a while until my husband said something to me that was probably one of the most brilliant things he's ever said. I was fussing about a price of a house. And he said, Jo, appraisers are historians, and real estate agents, well, they're fortune tellers. And I thought, wow, that was so smart. We are fortune tellers, not historians. And so I started working on a technique of pricing that started really serving me well. And I would like to share that technique with you today. And the first thing, though, I want to talk about is what are the consequences of an overpriced house for you? Well, there are many, and they are things like trying to market a house that's overpriced, and you're putting money toward marketing that house. Or there's things like you put so much time and energy on that overpriced house, then you're not spending time and energy in other places. There's things like having your sign up for so long that people are going, well, she can't sell a house, so your reputation gets damaged. But I think one of the most important ones is I have never had a seller who was yelling at me, and I think to myself, wow, I need to go get some more listings. So it fundamentally hurts your business. There's consequences for this too. The seller is struggling because they want to go on to their next place. So it's emotionally very hard on them. They're also struggling because they are ultimately going to get less. In my area, we have found that people who have overpriced houses, that they sit out there way too long, what happens is when they start getting offers, they start getting low offers. And ultimately, they get less than they would have had they priced it right in the beginning. So why become masterful now? As Leah and I were just discussing, now is the time that your skills have to come up and your skills have to become much better. And many of us spend time on our listing presentations and making sure that's really good, or really doing prospecting for listings. And we're doing a lot of work there. And then we don't become masterful at pricing. But if we do all of that and get the listing, but then can't price the listing, we've done a lot of work for no reward. So I believe that right now is the time to get your skills up, because pricing may be different as we go forward. So this is what I'm going to do. I am going to talk about pricing strategies, and we're going to look at several things. First, we're going to do a real quick review of the 3 types of markets. We're going to be talking about the difference between establishing an asking price and establishing a strategy. Then we're going to talk about the information of how you find a strategy. And then we're going to talk about the 3 pricing strategies there are and how you can use them. All right, let's talk about the 3 types of markets. But before we do, let me just say this. You might say to yourself, I know this about the 3 types of market. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. And I'm doing this to level set us. I need to make sure that we all understand each type of market as we go into the more advanced principles. So that's the reason I'm doing this. It's a quick level set to make sure we're all come together so we can go forward in talking about pricing strategies. As you know, there are 3 types of market. There is a rising market that favors the seller. There are more buyers in the market than there are sellers. There's a balanced market. That's when demand is equal. And then there's a falling market. That's the market that favors the buyer. That means that there are more houses in the market than there are buyers. So it favors the buyer. Now, here is an example of a rising market. Now, let me get you acclimated to my graph because you're going to see it a few times. Down on the horizontal axis, you're going to see time. And on the vertical axis, you're going to see price. Now, you will see the first X up the price axis is the indicated sales price. What I mean by that is the indicated sales price is given by the comparative market analysis, or the CMA. Some areas call it the value. Here we call it the indicated sales price by the comparative market analysis. Big old mouthful. Now, notice in this case that the market is rising, indicated by that arrow going up. The market is rising. And so if you have a market that's going up, there are more buyers than there are sellers. Could a seller price their house over the indicated sales price? Well, the answer is yes, they could. If what? If they're willing to wait, because it's going to take some time for the market and the price to intersect. Now, by the way, there are some risks to this, right? To pricing over the market and waiting. There are some risks to this. One of the risks is that the market will suddenly change. I've been in the market 27 years, and I have seen that happen on a couple of occasions when it has been a really rapid change, just really fast things turned. We saw that on September 11th. I've seen it in 2008. I've seen it locally in different markets as well. So I have seen that happen as well. So those are some of the risks, but also one of the risks is it doesn't appraise. So that's one of the risks of pricing it too high. But could you, in a rising market? Yes, if the seller is okay with waiting to get the higher price. All right, let's go to market number 2, a balanced market. Same graph, but here you see an indicated sales price, and the market is flat, indicated by the small arrow, or balanced. However you wish to call it, same thing. It means it's equal between the number of sellers and the number of buyers. What happens if a seller still wants to overprice the house or price it over the indicated sales price? Well, what happens is that the market is not increasing to meet the price, and as a result, very often a seller will be waiting. And many times they're going to have to do some price reductions, and ultimately it could sell for under what it should have sold for. Now, why does that happen? Well, it happens because the house gets stale. That the longer a house is on the market, the more people are going, what is wrong with that? So the more people are doing things like that. And so that is one of the reasons. It not only might it sell for less, but in addition, they may make less in their pocket, because when it's been on the market for a while and they accept a lower sales price, then very often they're in a bad position on negotiating things like inspections. So ultimately, they make less money in their pocket. Now let's look at the third type. And this is when the market is falling. There is many more sellers in the market than there are buyers. So the indicated sales price may be here, but the market is falling. Now, if a seller still wanted to price it over the indicated sales price, more than likely, as they did price reductions, they may not ever catch up with the market. That depends on how much they reduce it, and it depends on how fast the market is dropping. So in the States, we saw that in 2008. We saw the market dropping faster than the sellers were dropping their prices. And what ended up happening, again, were many short sales. And we call this chasing the market down. And unfortunately, we have seen that. So those are the 3 types of markets that we see. And that's for everyone: balanced, seller's market, buyer's market. So let's take this a little bit further and let's talk about an indicated sales price versus a pricing strategy. So what's an indicated sales price? An indicated sales price is the price range that was discovered by the comparable market analysis, or the CMA. You, again, may call that value, where we call it indicated sales price. A pricing strategy, however, is a bit different. A pricing strategy is the practice of finding the best way to get from where they are now to where they want to be. Now, we're going to talk about the 4 pieces of information that you need to create a strategy. Excuse me. So here are the 4. Number one is you need to know the indicated sales price via the CMA. That's the very first thing you do, is do a comparative market analysis. Number 2, you discover what the market trend is for that house. Now, I believe that the majority of the multiple listing systems out there in the world show you the data of whether a particular price point and a particular area is a seller's market, a buyer's market, or a balanced market. So you can get that data fairly easily. You also can calculate it yourself, and it's called the absorption rate. And so you can calculate it yourself, but that is very easily available in our multiple listing systems now. The third piece of information that you need to know is what's most important to the seller. Is it most important for them to get the most money, or is it more important for them to sell quickly? It's a very critical question. And number 4, you need to do an evaluation of the competition, because at the end of the day, it's a beauty contest. And so we've got to understand how we're comparing to other houses. So let's take a deep dive into each one of these, starting with determining your selling price. I am making an assumption here that you know how to do a comparative market analysis, or a CMA. And I said it a few minutes ago, but you know, when I was getting my real estate license in 1993, one of the things that I learned was that you do a comparative market analysis to find the best price. And I came out of real estate school believing that. And it is a piece of finding the best pricing strategy. But it alone is struggles, because it's historic and doesn't give us an idea of what's happening in the market right now. Let's go to number 2, discover the market trend, whether it's a seller's market, a buyer's market, or a balanced market. And by the way, I just talked about the absorption rate just a minute ago. So let's talk just really briefly about what absorption rates are. And then if you have further questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end, or you can go and speak to your manager about what an absorption rate is. But the definition of absorption rate is if no more homes in this price point or this location were to come onto the market, how long would it take all of these homes in this price point and location to be absorbed into the market at the current rate? When you discover that, what happens is you discover how many months of inventory there are. And months of inventory tells you whether it's a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a balanced market. That is how the market trend is determined. It's determined by how many months of inventory there are. Now, one of the things I would really like to say, and that is, much of the world has just gone through this big seller's market where the prices have been going up, and when somebody asks us how's the market, which is the number one question a real estate agent gets asked, many times we'll say, oh, it's great, it's wonderful. But the reality is that within a market, there's some price points in some locations that are sellers markets, and there are some that are balanced and some that are buyers market. That rarely is it the same type of market for all houses in all neighborhoods and all price points. So always remember that when someone says to you, how's the market? You can say, you know, it's trending toward a seller's market. However, it really depends on price point and location. What area are you most interested in knowing about? And that allows you to ask a big open-ended question at the end and understand if this is just a passing question, or do they really want to have a house they need to know about. So that is a great script for you as you're going forward and people are asking you, how's the market? And by the way, we are getting a lot of how's the market right now. And we have a lot of agents in the States going out and talking to their sphere of influence and calling them and saying, just checking in, how's everything going? And you know, they're saying, how's the market? So make sure that you have a script that engages them in a conversation instead of just telling, well, it's blah, 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 blah. Say to them, well, it's trending this way, but it's very specific to location and it's very specific to price point. What specific house would you like to know about? And so that helps open the conversation. All right. Well, my hidden slides are no longer hidden. So let me tell you real quickly, this is how I had hid this slide. Sorry. So let me go ahead and tell you how you do an absorption rate. You get the CMA, you determine how many houses are currently on the market, and then you look at how many have closed in the past X days. That fill in the blank is all about your market. In this example, there are 24 houses on the market, and they were 6 houses that had sold in the criteria that we told them. And as a result, we have 4 months of inventory in the market. That is how you do absorption. Now, this is what it means. If there's less than 4 months, you're considered in a seller's market. If you're more than 6 months, you are considered in a buyer's market. And if you are 6 months, you're a balanced market. This is the general assumption of appraisal. But let me say, you need to check your individual areas for this. All right, number 3, what is most important to the seller? Is it price or time? Now, let me unpack this just a little bit, because this is found by asking the question of saying to the seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can you tell me which one is most important, price or time? And I almost can hear you shouting at the screen saying, but Joe, what if they say both? Well, and they will. A lot of times people will say, well, they're both important to me. Well, unfortunately, they are the yin and yang of real estate. So what happens is, if they want a higher price, what happens? Time goes way up, because the higher the price, the longer it's going to take to sell. And if they are really interested in moving quickly, what happens? Time goes down. So I have said to many sellers in my lifetime, hey, you know, they're opposed to one another. They are opposed to one another. So why don't you just give me percentages? Give me a percentage of how important is each one of them. This may be the most important question that you could ask a seller. So incredibly important question. And I believe that this one, I believe that actually, and I'm going off pricing for a second. I believe that there are 4 questions that are most important. And one of those questions is, if the world was perfect, when would I be handing your equity check? Now, you and I both know we don't hand equity checks, but I'm giving them the visual. When am I handing them money? And that helps you know what their thought process is on time. The next 2 are questions that have to be asked together, and they have to be asked in this order. First question is, what would happen if your house sold really quickly? Now, what you're looking for there is, well, I guess I'd have to move to an apartment, or I guess I'd go ahead and go. Versus, well, I wouldn't be able to accept that offer. That would indicate to you maybe they're not as ready as you think they might be. The next question is, what would happen if the house didn't sell? And that is us getting to their pain. How painful is this? Is it going to be, okay, well, I'll wait till next year? Or is it going to be, that's a really big problem because I need to move and I can't get a place in the new city without this one being sold? Those are really good to uncover pain. And then this is the last one. What's most important, price or time? All right, and then number 4, who's the competition? Who's the competition? Like I said a minute ago, this is a bit of a beauty contest, right? So shoppers in general comparison shop, right? So we go in and we look at one thing and then we compare it to another thing. And, you know, for the last 9 weeks, we do our shopping online. I have been doing a lot of shopping on Amazon. And so when I go in and click on something that I want to look at, it also shows me similar products, right? It shows me similar products. That's how people shop, and buyers are absolutely no different. So you always have to understand the competition. So let me show you what I'm talking about. If I have a subject house and it's 2,400 square feet, it has 3 bathrooms and a 2-car garage, what would be the best price? Now, I am showing you this without a CMA, right? Without a CMA. I'm doing this from let's reason this out from the competition perspective. So if you look at my chart, I have competition here, and this is direct competition, and I have them in descending price order. And so my subject has 2,400 square feet. And so if you look at 123 Apple Street, it has 2,500. And if you look at 456 Pear Street, there's 2,374. Both of them have 3 bathrooms and both of them have a 2-car garage. So given this example, more than likely, my price would fall somewhere between Apple Street and Pear Street. There it would be. If I wasn't using a CMA, if I wasn't looking at any of those things, I was just looking at the competition. Now here during the recession, when we didn't have any comparables because not much was selling, this is how we adjust, how we set prices, is by looking at the competition. Now, let's say that this seller of this 2,400 square foot, 3 bathroom, 2-car garage house said to me, I appreciate me tucking in between Apple Street and Pear Street, but I need to sell fast. I need to sell fast. So what if they wanted to sell fast? Well, then we might bring it down in between Pear Street and Orange Street because it would compare so favorably to the competition. So if I had a price of $287, for example, and I had a buyer in that price range, and I went and looked at Pear Street and I went and looked at Orange Street, and this house had 2,400 square feet, I might go, I'm going to take the better one. I'm going to take the better one. So this is what I'm talking about by looking at your competition, by doing a really great analysis, again, not of the comparables, but of the competition, the ones that are on the market, because you have to understand that they're going to be comparing this one against this one against this one. And so understanding where you place them based on this. That's how you look at your competition. Once you gather up that information, your comparative market analysis or your CMA, what the trend of the market is, and then you understand what's most important, time or money, and then number 4, you look at their competition. Now you're ready to talk about pricing strategies. All right, so let's go and talk about this. Here are the 3 possible pricing strategies a house could have. Number 1 pricing strategy, price the house above the competition. Number 2, price a house with the competition. And number 3, price the house below the competition. Now I want to talk about this for a second. As soon as a sign goes in a yard, the house is no longer a house. The house just became a product for sale. It's a product just like any other product is. Every product on earth, when it comes time to price them, there is a question about where I should price it. Should we price it above competition, with competition, or below competition? One of my very favorite things is my Vaseline lip gloss. And I assure you, Vaseline went through this idea of what is my favorite, what should we price it at, above, with, or below the competition? Houses are exactly the same. The principles of economics apply to houses. Now, the thing that gets difficult is that there's an emotional attachment to houses, right? There's emotional attachment to houses. And so as we work through the strategies, we're going to be talking a little bit about why this helps you with the emotions of the sellers. All right, pricing strategy number 1. You could price it above the competition, above the competition. Now, the question is, should we price it above the competition? I would lay this chart out to a seller and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here is my chart. On the bottom is time, and on the vertical axis is price. The indicated sales price is this. However, your market is going up. There are more buyers than there are sellers. Therefore, we have an opportunity to go higher. Remember, if they go higher, they have to wait for the market to meet their price. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that if a seller has said to you, we need to sell the house fast, if they have said that to you, this would not be a good strategy for them. This would not be a good strategy for them. So again, here, I know the indicated sales price by the CMA. I have that. I know that the market is going up. I have that. The seller has said, I want to price it above the indicated sales price, and that's amazing unless they want to sell quickly. So if they don't want to sell quickly, this is not a good strategy for them. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to think about this idea of, instead of just going in and going, here is my CMA, let's talk about what the market is saying. Rather, going in and saying, here's the CMA, here's the market trend, here is the competition. We know you have told me that what's most important to you is time. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here is strategy number 1, which is pricing the house above the market. But because you've told me time is more important to you than price, this is not a strategy that is good for you. So I want you to think about that, because what I discovered by using this technique of going in and laying each of the strategies out for them, and then going in and saying, you know, based on what we're seeing, your CMA, your trend, and what's most important to you in your competition, then based on that, the best strategy would be either pricing it above, pricing it with, or pricing it below. Now, within that strategy, where do you want to price it? And what I found is that when I started doing that, several things happened. The first one was I looked really smart in comparison to the other agents that were coming in with the CMA. That they were like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. She's done the work, right? Which increased my credibility. And that is crazy important. It also made me much more of a partner with them instead of just telling them what to price it at. You know, I had a really unusual situation. Gosh, this is probably is 6 or 7 years ago, when I was hired by a company, a really large company, that asked me to do a project with them. And the project they asked me to do was, they wanted to, for every one of their 211 agents, to come in front of me and give me their listing appointment, or give me a listing appointment. They were treating me like a fake seller. They knew I was fake, but they're treating me like a fake seller. And they came in and they gave me their listing appointment, and we had given them a fake house for them to do pricing on, etc. The intention of it was for me to help them get better, to critique them, to give them pointers, etc. And what I found really interesting was that the vast majority of the agents came in and just told me the price, versus making it a partnership like this strategy does. All right, pricing strategy number 2 is to price it with the competition. So here we are with the competition. Now, why might I price a house with the competition? Well, I might price a house with the competition because it's flat, right? And if I price it with the competition in a flat or balanced market, well, then price is most important to the seller. And you might think, I'm not sure I get that. Well, let me tell you what this is. When you price something with everything else, then you're reducing the chances of it selling, because it's in the group. It doesn't stand out unless, of course, it has something about the house that makes it stand out. But it's vanilla. It's vanilla. I had a house one time that there were 18 townhouses that were all the same floor plan. They were all on the market all at the same time. And everybody had priced them at $118,900. And we made the decision that we were going to price it $500 under that, just $500. And ours was the first one to sell. So it's really interesting when they're all in the same price point. It's hard for them to stand out. Now, pricing strategy number 3 is pricing it below the competition. Now, why would you price a house below the competition? Well, for 2 reasons. The first reason would be the market here is flat and you want to sell it fast. I would have to go slightly under the indicated sales price. Or the second reason I would price it below is because the market is falling. And by putting it below, I can catch the fall. So those are the 2 reasons I would price the house below the competition. So we have 3 of them, right? We have pricing above the competition. Only really a great idea if the market is going up and the seller is willing to wait for the market to make the price. Pricing strategy number 2, pricing it with the market. Great idea if the market is going up, but your seller wants to sell fast, or the market is flat and price is most important to them. Or pricing strategy number 3, which is pricing below the competition. And pricing below the competition, you would do that if your market was flat and you wanted to sell quickly, or if your market was going down. Now, we've already really discussed the advantages of this system of pricing, and it really goes back to, it's a much more informed way, because you're giving them 4 data points: the CMA, the market trend, the competition, and understanding whether they want price or time. You're also being much more collaborative by laying out each one of the strategies and having a discussion around each one of them. And also, once you decide on the strategy that you want to use that works the best for their circumstances, then you can drill down to the price, versus coming in with a price and telling them this is the price range, okay? So those are the advantages. So how might you change your pricing systems? If there was just one thing that you might change, it would be, I would think it would be looking at the trends. If you don't use the trends, but showing them what the trends are doing. because the trends are super important. Remember, a CMA is looking backward primarily. And I've seen it many times over my years that a CMA says one thing, but what's happening right now in the market is something totally different. Just something totally different. So for example, I had a house one time that we were putting on the market, and the CMA was a strong CMA, but what happened was that there was a person who owned multiple houses in that neighborhood that declared bankruptcy, and the court had forced him to sell the houses, and they all came on all at the same time at greatly reduced prices. And so it really didn't matter that the CMA said this house should sell for $200,000. The competition was sitting at about 130. So that is a really important thing. CMA is backward, market trend is forward. So that's one of the first things that I would do. So again, remember, appraisers are historians and real estate agents are fortune tellers. All right, Lee, I would love to see if there's any questions that I could answer, because I know I've gone through this pretty fast, and it's a pricing. And pricing is not fast generally.
No, it's not, but you've asked a lot of really good questions and phrased things for people in ways that I'm sure they appreciate. Just being able to approach these situations with clients a little bit differently. So if you do have a question, please type it in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We'll get Joe to answer them for us today. We'll just wait a couple of seconds because I know there's a little bit of a delay.
Right.
Are you finding that these pricing discussions, in your experience, are they difficult? Are these difficult conversations to have with clients, or do they get easier as time goes on?
They get easier as time goes on. You know, in the beginning of my career, I was always afraid about it because I hated the objection of my house is worth more than that. And then as you start developing a system about how you're going to do this, it becomes much easier. You know, I am a student. I mean, that's just who I am. I'm a student. I love to dig in and research. And I found that two things. The first thing is that if you have a collaborative system like I've laid out here versus just going to them and saying, here's the CMA. And if you have a collaborative system where they feel like they're part of it, that's a lot of the battle. But I've also discovered that just like a listing presentation has a flow to it, your pricing presentation should too. That you need to ease them into it, that you need to start by saying to them things like, okay, what we're going to talk about is what the market is saying, right? That's probably the biggest thing I see agents do is they say, well, I think the price is. Well, you don't think what the price is. You're reading the tea leaves of the market. It is what the market is saying about it. So get rid of that in your vernacular when you're talking, and that you ease people into it, and you remove a lot of objections through the conversation before they have them. You have a process, a replicatable process of how you lay out pricing information where you leave nothing out, there's nothing going through their brain because you covered it all. So there's nobody over there thinking, well, she didn't talk about Zillow, right? Talk about it and have that in your process. Right. Does that make sense?
It sure does. And as you've been talking, we've had lots of questions coming in. So I'm just going to move right to those. Some new owners that are unrealistic. What's the best approach for dealing with them?
Some new owners are very unrealistic. They really are. So this is what they tend to be unrealistic about. They are unrealistic about because their tax value is different or their estimate is different or whatever. I learned a long time ago, by the way, Lee, I'm a psychologist by education. And so this has helped me a lot in my real estate business, as a matter of fact. But one of the things that I found that was very important to say to people up front is to say to them, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know, my job is to bring you the information about what the market is saying and to help guide you through it. And my job is to tell you when I think you're making a decision that could harm you in the long term. That's my job. And I also understand that this is a difficult time of change. And when is a difficult time of change, many people will want to increase their price. As a matter of fact, there is a term for it, and it's called the endowment effect. And the endowment effect says that when someone goes to sell something and they're experiencing a sense of loss, that what their brain does is their brain goes, no, it's worth more than that. And it helps ease that sense of loss. And I say to people, I did it when I sold my house. I said to my husband that my house is better than the rest of them. And he laughed at me and said, yeah, no, it's really not. And I realized I was doing it too as a real estate professional. So I just want you to understand this is very common. And it's very, very common to feel like the price should go up. My job is to lay out the market for you and to guide you through it. And so that was my way. I called it out, Lee. I told them, you're going to do this. It's normal. It's human. And it's okay because I'm going to help guide you through it. I know that's kind of crazy in it, but that's the way I always used to approach it.
The mentality of a psychologist. Thank you.
That's right. That's right.
We've got 2 questions about calculation of an absorption rate. Can you give some advice on that?
Absolutely. So first off, Lee, do y'all use absorption rates in your market?
We've got 2 questions about it, so I'm thinking yes.
Okay. All right. So let me say about absorption rates. So absorption rate, really, if you think about it, let's think about your own house and think about if no more houses came onto the market that would be competitor to your house. And how long would it take every house like your house to get sold at the current pace they're selling? So there's really 2 questions there. The first question is, how many houses are on the market right now that are like your subject house? And the second question is, what pace are they selling at, right? So those are the 2 pieces of data you have to find. So let's say, for example, that there are 25 houses on the market right now. And you look at how fast these houses are selling. And you look at that by looking at how many have closed in the last recent amount of time. And the recent amount of time has to do with average days on the market of your market. And that is the pace that they're going at. And let's say, for example, that there were 10 houses that had sold recently. So 10 houses that have sold recently. And I am just going to make sure I don't say something stupid, I'm calculating it. That's 2.5 months. So it would take 2.5 months for every house in that price point to go to get absorbed into the market. That means you have 2.5 months of inventory. And 2.5 months of inventory means that there are more buyers out there than sellers, because 6, it tends to be the golden rule. If it's more than 6 months of inventory, then it's a buyer's market. If it's less than 6, it's a seller's market. Does that help?
Yes, that's great.
Good.
Another question, the CMA is history. How do we get people talking about, when do we get to talk about the trend as opposed to the past?
Right. And so I usually, in your pricing presentation, when you transition from your listing presentation to your pricing presentation, one of the things that you really need to do is set up expectations up front and say to the seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I have a process that I use to help educate you about what the market is saying about your house. So this is what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about trends, and then we're going to talk about, and you lay it out for them. And I go right in up front and talk about the trend of the market and do a little bit of education with them. So I will often say to people, you know, the news is always out there saying it's a seller's market or if it's a buyer's market, and that's not really the way it works. In fact, trends are a little bit like the weather. It could have a thunderstorm 2 miles over there and be sunny here. And that's the way market trends are. So the very first thing I want to do is educate you on your market trend. What market trend are we seeing for these kind of houses in your neighborhood in this moment of time? And so that's how I start. And I usually show them trends first. I show them trends, I show them their competition, and then I show them their comparative market analysis. Is usually my method, because when they hear the comparative market analysis and they don't like it, then their brain is going to shut down on me. And yeah, that didn't work for me. I need to get all the rest of the information. I need to get the rest of the information to them before that happens.
Yes, all part of the strategy. We've got one: when we price low and there's an offer from a lowballer bargaining for a much lower price. If the seller asks, how do we handle lowballers?
Okay, so lowballers, it's really interesting because I just got a lowball offer on one of my houses today. So it's a really good time to be talking about that. So when a lowball offer comes in, I always say to a seller, it does not matter where we start, it matters where we finish. That's the first script that comes out of my mouth, because I need to diffuse the situation of them getting all fussy. Oh, how dare somebody give me that offer? Yeah, you know, it really doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with them. So let's just go through and negotiate this. So when a lowball price comes in, they have 3 choices, right? Number 1 choice is they can say, we don't believe you're a serious buyer, so no thank you. Second choice is they can put in a counter offer, but there's also a third choice, and the third choice is counter offer slightly. It's called the bid low, jump high strategy. And if let's say the house is $200,000 and somebody put in a $180,000 bid, and the seller is like, okay, I'm not sure about this. Well, I would encourage them to make a counter offer of $198,000, which is $2,000 off the asking price, because that tells that buyer, I'm willing to play, but I don't think you're serious. So if you're serious, you better jump on up now. And so that is how I approach lowball offers, is to just educate the seller right off the top and say, hey, no problem. Let's figure out if they're a lowballer or if there's somebody who's serious, but they just think they need a lowball up front. So that would be my advice.
Great. I have another one here, and I'm going to read it, and I'm hoping it will make sense to you. Some sell out condos quickly below market around them, but others use the comparatives in the condo with is unrealistic to surrounding market in the area. What is the best approach? So if there's a bunch of for sale and some are selling at sellout below market prices, but comps are higher, how do you approach that?
So what I think I hear in that question is they're comparing their house, the seller is comparing their house to a higher house, a better house. Is that what I'm hearing, Lee?
Let's answer that question. Yes.
Okay. All right, good. So I will answer that one because, and again, human nature, right? Human nature is to compare your house to a better house. You know, very often I would see sellers go, but my house compares to my neighbor's house. Well, their house was 500 square feet bigger, and their house had a 3-car garage on a 2-car garage. So that happens very often. And what I have found is that when you have somebody who's just, they really want to do that, then it's best to show them the houses that compare to theirs, and then show them a house that does not compare to theirs, and put them in a buyer's mindset. All right, we're going to be buyers. We're going to be buyers and we're going to go shopping. And I'm a buyer who would like this house. Let's go look at other houses that would compare and see if they're going to buy this house at that amount and help put them in that buyer's position. I found that putting them in the buyer's shoes is a good thing to do. So for example, one of the number one objections that we hear are, but I need my equity out of it, right? I need that price. Even when that price isn't the right price, I need that price. And, you know, it's very easy to say to them, all right, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's say that we were out looking for a house for you. And we had gone into a house and you said, I like this house, but I think it's too high. And I said to you, I understand that, but the seller needs this amount of money. What would you say to that seller? And so transporting them into, let's look at it through the buyer's eyes, is one of the most important things to do, is put them in that footprint.
I think that's excellent advice, and force them to answer some of those questions. What to do if a seller insists on selling way more than a realistic price? I think we kind of answered that question, but do you have something else to add to it?
Let me say, that's their choice, right? It's their house, it's their choice. That they make the decisions. I'm in charge of the process, right? That's how the real estate business works. They do decisions, I do process. And if they are insistent on it, and I have advised them about what the consequences of that are, and they say, no, I don't care, then you have a decision. And your decision is, I'm going to go forward with this. Or your decision is, yeah, I'm not willing to do this house. I'm not willing to list this house. Those are your decisions. Now, let me say to you this. I have many times listed overpriced houses, knowing I was doing that because I had agreements with the sellers. I would say to the seller, all right, look, 20 days. In fact, I'd probably make it 21 days. 21 days. 21 days. At the end of 21 days, if we do not have a contract on this house, we're going to the price that I have suggested that the market is saying about your house. And if they agree to that, then I'm going to go ahead and hand them the written agreement where they're going to sign it that says on this date, it goes to this price. Don't ever just make a handshake agreement on that, because they're not going to remember. So you hand them the agreement. I assume that y'all do modification of contracts kinds of forms. That's what we do here. And that they sign it. And on that 21st day, when it hasn't sold, I get to call them and say, okay, guess what? It is 21st day and we agreed that this price goes here. If they will agree to that, I'm usually fine with it. If they just won't agree to it, then yeah, it's probably not good for me. Now, by the way, earlier I said, you know, there's a set of questions I ask people. And one of the questions is, if this house doesn't sell, what will happen if this house doesn't sell? And that usually gives you the indicators of how high they're going to price a house. Because if they say, well, okay, that's fine, I'm willing to wait for it to sell, you can make pretty darn sure that there is bad pricing coming at you. And if the seller's not motivated to sell, and lots of sellers are not motivated. You would think if they sign a listing agreement that they're motivated, but there are lots of sellers who just really aren't sellers. They're being forced to sell for some reason. They're getting a divorce, or they had a spouse pass away and they know they need to, and their children are pressuring them to, but they don't want to. You know, so you see things like that all the time. So if a seller is not motivated, they're more than likely going to price their house too high. That was a long answer to that question. Sorry.
It was a good answer, though. We're talking about some of the emotions that people might be going through. I think that wraps up all the questions. Yes. So, Jill, we had a ton of feedback. People saying really useful information. They're going to use all of these tactics. and strategy. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. It's been great fun.
It has been fun. We've really enjoyed having you, and we had Brian on last week and Catherine on the week before. And
Catherine this week later.
Yes, we are looking forward to welcoming Catherine tomorrow as well. She is part of Joe's training team, and we are talking about presenting and negotiating a contract virtually. That is tomorrow's topic. We will be back here tomorrow at the same time, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We also have a number of questions coming in. If people can view these slides or get a copy of this presentation, please know that it will continue to live on our Facebook page, the entire video, so you can go back and review the slides and Joe's presentation on demand starting very shortly. So please go and do it, and I'm sure there's lots to learn. Thank you so much again, Joe. We look forward to working with you further, and we look forward to seeing Catherine tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you for having me.